Right about now, you are listening to the Legacy and Leadership Podcast, a show where we discuss living as a leader worth following, leading others to do the same, and in doing so, leaving a legacy for future generations. My name is Jimmie Gonzalez Jr., a learning and development professional and leadership coach, sitting down with my co-host, Anthony Devon Watts Jr., an expert contact center leader that has effectively led and developed dynamic teams with high motivation. Together, we have over 30 years experience in the corporate game. Join us as we discuss our growth as leaders, share the lessons we've learned, and interview others to see how their leadership style was shaped as they were mentored by adversity.
Well, hello there, good people. This is your co-host, Jimmie Gonzalez Jr. of the Legacy and Leadership Podcast. And as always, I am joined by my good friend, my homeboy, Anthony Devon Watts Jr.
Yo. Is that kind of, you can hear Kai in the background too?
And Kai.
Hey, what's up, Kai? Shout out, Kai.
We're definitely excited about this episode. This is something that we've been talking about for a couple of weeks in our previous episodes. This is episode 4. If you haven't listened to 3 or 2, please go back and do so. So you can learn a little bit about myself and Devon as we interview and ask each other questions. But this is the first episode in our session of MBA, or mentored by adversity. So then we have definitely a special guest with us, but I will allow you, Devon, to do the intros, man.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. So, yeah, I'm super excited to have with us today a really, really good friend of mine, somebody who has known me since the first day I really touched a track, actually. The first day I really touched a track, from middle school, man. So, Pastor Shavier Martinez, man, a good friend of mine. I'm super excited to have you. How you feeling, man? How you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. You should have told them since the first time you started smoking all of us on a track. I used to be the fastest kid in school, and then, you decided to take that from me. That's all right. It's good. So, yeah, it's been a little while, but I'm good, bro. Good to see you guys.
Man. Awesome, man. How's the family?
They're good. I got 2 little boys, a 3-year-old named Lion and a 1-year-old Tank named River. He's 4 pounds lighter than his older brother, so he's a little girthy, little bam for sure. So but they're good, and my wife Christina, she's doing great, and they're letting me hang out tonight with the boys. So
we appreciate it. Of course, we appreciate it, man. We're thankful, man. What about you, Jimmie, man? How you doing today, bro?
Oh, I'm doing good. Little known fact by many, I guess, but Bam Bam was my nickname in high school. So
yeah.
Bam. But I'm good. Happy about the weekend. How's it going so far? Been a little tired. I started working out with my friend at the gym over the last week. So just trying to allow myself to acclimate to getting up early again and actually going to the gym and doing that whole routine. So, but besides that, I'm good, man. I'm excited again about this next episode and this conversation. So I'm ready to go.
Yeah, for sure, man. Do they have like kind of like the whole like Rona setup for the gym and stuff like that now? Like,
Yes. So in this one, they're actually doing a really good job from what I can tell. There's specific times where you can actually go in. So like we get there about 6:15, starts at 6:30 to 7:30, and they lock it down after that. And then I guess for another 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes after that, they clean and wipe everything down and disinfect before they let another group of people come in.
Okay.
So
nice.
But then it's just up to everybody within there to socially distance and kind of stay away from everybody else as much as possible.
Yeah, true. Well, you're not low either, Shav, because I see you starting to get back in it too.
I'm trying, but I'm doing it in the crib so I can do it. Man, me and wife, not that it's a little known fact. I'm fighting dad bod. I came on the other side of 30 and things are coming a little harder.
Oh my gosh.
So the jeans are, feeling a little tighter. Shirt's getting a little tight in the wrong spots. I was like, I think it's time. It's time to get back. And so we're doing like a home gym thing right now. So we bought a rig, threw the mats down, got all the bumpers, and I'm trying. Like I tried for so long just to work out and try anything. I like throwing around weights, man. I got to throw some weight around. So I try a little bit of everything, and then so my wife is all about it too. She's like, I've never been an athlete before, but I'm ready to ripped and this and that. I'm like, let's do it. I'm like, all I know how to do is put on muscle though. So we just gonna bulk her up.
Bulk up.
Bulk her up. Especially with raising these two boys. I'm like, listen, bam, bam, and boom, boom. We gotta get y'all going. We gotta get it right. So yeah trying, man, bro. I'm trying.
That's what's up, man. That's lovely. I'm not mad at that.
Yeah, that's cool. I got a gym in my garage as well, so most of my workouts I've done there. But that's a blessing too, man. Just being able to work out with the wifey and have that time together. Definitely have experienced that in the past, and it's always just good for the body, good for the spirit. It's just good for the marriage.
Yeah. Sure.
I mean, once you get through kind of that awkward phase, because I'm going through that right now with Gabby, and ooh boy, like we just started working out together for the very first time. And she does not like me. Like the first day, I had her doing like legs, like just a bunch of like squat routines and stuff like that. Man, she had to walk upstairs, and she was like, "It's not supposed to feel like this. I can't walk. This is your fault. Stay away." I'm like, look, if you're not mad at me, then I'm not doing something right. So we gotta push you. We gotta push you.
Push. That's good.
Yeah, for sure.
Dope. Cool. All right, man. Well, for me, guys, I'm in good spirits. Actually, I was going to share with you guys real quick. I'm kind of like in this awkward situation because most recently with moving, like the hardest part about moving to me is finding a new barber. And I have been struggling for a couple of weeks now to find a new barber. I finally found one. Like, dude, he's on point. I've gone to him twice. You can tell, like, he actually knows his thing. He's making recommendations. Like, I told him, hey, this is how I get my haircut. He's like, yeah, but I hear you, but would you be open if it like we made it a little dark? I'm like, okay, you got your little confidence about you. All right, bro. Yeah, go ahead. Right. Go off. So like today I finally made the commitment. I'm like, all right, this is the dude I'm going to start going to. Cause my last barber, guys, she was cutting my head for maybe about 8 years. And we stopped interacting obviously once like Rona hit, and then I ended up moving like a couple months into that, right? So tell me, this is just like the universe out of nowhere. Guess who texted me today? My old barber. Like as soon as I make the commitment, my old barber, no lie,
he felt something.
He felt it.
In the spirit, he was just like, So he just hit me up. He's like, hey man, checking on you. Everything good with the fam? I'm like, yeah, everything's good, man. It's crazy. So like I moved, and he's like, what? Like you moved like where? Like because I was staying in Sanford at the time. So he's like the Lake Mary area, like Winter Springs. I was like, nah, man, I moved to like Boca, like South Florida. Bro, I could just feel the hurt. He's like, oh, it felt like I was going through a breakup actually. He's like, oh, I'm happy for you, and I was just like, yeah, man, I hope everything's good with the kids and stuff like that. So I don't know. I think I'm gonna give it a couple of days. I'm gonna send him another message. Just be like, hey, if I'm in the Orlando area, though, I'm gonna come see you.
I'm about to say, yeah. Next time you're in town, come check me out, please.
Yeah, man. So, but aside from that, everything's lovely, man. So I'm excited to get into it.
That could be a whole podcast episode on itself. For the guys out there listening, maybe I know how ladies are when they're going to the hair salon. Like, who cuts your hair? I'm very particular. So I told you, the guys that I work out with, my friend, he's been my barber for like 20 years. So I'm very particular about, serious talk about who I let cut my hair. When I was in school, I would be real particular. But, I take care of that with Gillette and Bic. But my beard, I've been going to a homie. You might remember Big John. So Big John's a barber. So I mean, when a bald guy still goes to the barber just to get his beard trimmed, I do it for the fam and the relationship. But we're rocking. I mean, that's 20 plus years too, because we've known us since we were kids. So that's crazy, because even at any point when I thought about moving, like, man, what am I going to do about my barber and getting my hair cut? Like, it's that serious.
Right. It's that serious. I already had like 1 or 2 bad cuts just from trying people out. So yeah, it's that hurt. But cool, man. So again, I guess, Jimmy, we can probably provide just a little bit of background about the MBA series and kind of what we're going to tackle before we really get into it, man.
Yeah, so we've, again, mentioned it a few times on some of the other episodes, and mentored biodiversity is really a concept that Devon came up with. And once we talked about it, we really were excited about getting to this point in the podcast. giving us an opportunity to interview other folks and just have conversations with people that we know, people that we maybe have not met before, and trying to learn more about their personality, but more importantly, what they've been through in their life and the adversity that they've gone through and how they've learned, how they've grown as a leader through that adversity. So we've also talked about the fact that while we're trying our best to learn from each other and hopefully really share things with our audience that they're going to be able to learn from, like, we're learners, and we're hoping that as we go through this conversation with Shavi today, that, you know, we're going to be able to learn something from him and be mentored ourselves through that process. So again, really excited about, you know, this next series and seeing how it goes.
Absolutely, man. So, Shav, so I know I provided like a super high level introduction to our listeners about who you are and our relationship, and a little bit of your background. I alluded to your profession, you know, letting people know that you're a pastor, but you know, nobody can articulate it better than the man himself in your own words, man. So just tell us a little bit about yourself personally and, you know, professionally. You know, who is Shavier Martinez, man?
Yeah, I love that. You know, it's funny because even thinking of pastor, right? I came to be a pastor in a way that felt like, at least to me, like a roller coaster, unexpected for sure. Kind of all the drops and the lows and the highs and everything else. You know, played sports my whole life and got to the same place where it's like, all right, signing day, you're gonna play football, where, and all those things. And I came to know or be in a relationship with the Lord in my senior year of high school, while I always had, you know, a family that believed. And although my parents tried to do right by us in all the ways, we just weren't a church going family. It just wasn't something that we did. Obviously had a lot of respect for those who did practice their faith, but it just wasn't something that we regularly did. So going into my senior year, I had this wild encounter, and just felt like my whole life was about to get changed and rocked, and got clean, changed my whole life. And I remember being an 18-year-old kid, and I was just like, I just want to do ministry. And it's like, what do you say to your parents after you break your body up? You hurt so hard. You got coaches in your living room. And I remember when I was being recruited, I'd ask questions like, listen, hey, coach, what church do you go to? And they'd be like, what? Son, they got chapel? And I'm like, no. What church do you go to? And like, do you go? And because for me, it was so real, so honest. And I just knew at 18 years old, like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to give myself to this. And it felt really honest for me. And so even then, to see where I'm at now, my wife and I, we get to pastor a community here in Orlando called Tribe. And, you know, we've been doing that since 2017, where we're the lead pastors. But prior to that, right out of high school, didn't go off to play college ball because I was wild enough to think I was ready, you know, just to do ministry full time. I was like, man, I'm ready. And so it's always weird because I pastored a youth group and never was actually a part of a youth group. So I was like 22 years old as a youth leader. Then little by little, it was just like, yo, you should pastor the youth. You should start. I'm pastoring my peers is what it really felt like, because you got people my same age in the group or the young adult studies. So I got about, I would say, if we include those early rough years, over a decade of pastoral leadership, which is wild. Wow. But, you know, getting to do it now, we just do our best to try not to make a mess of it and really just steward what we've been trusted with. So I'm honored. I'm honored to do it. I'm honored to be on. I'm excited to get to share some of those things because, as you guys can imagine, being, you know, a 18, 19-year-old leader, you gonna make a whole lot of mistakes, and you're gonna, you know, learn a whole lot. And it was funny because my pastor, who trusted me with that role, he said, like, I'm like, hey, Shah, why you can either go off, we're gonna send you to seminary, you can do that and go to school, and, you know, we get you right. It's like, are we gonna put you in the game? You're gonna learn on the field. And I was like, yeah, I kind of want to learn on the field.
Yeah, put me in the game, coach.
Like, put me in the game, let me play, you know. And man, just like in life, you know, we made a mess, but we also did a lot of great things, and it was formative to, man, I gave my 20s to ministry, and now coming into my own now, my early 30s, to see where God has taken us through, my family and I. It's been beautiful. It's like nothing we could have ever imagined. I wouldn't change anything about the process for sure.
Yeah, man, that's amazing. Like, it's crazy to hear you talk about it because obviously for our listeners, I already kind of told you guys, Shav and I go back to middle school, right? So even though we didn't go to the same high school, I mean, that's bro, that's love. So I was always aware kind of what was going on with you from a sports perspective. And then I was sharing with Jimmy the last time we talked that we linked back up at the All-Star game for Orange County, right? Man. And so to think that was wild. So like to think that, you had attained kind of that level of success, in sports that very few get the opportunity to experience, right? To join a team, to end up being the best, to be recognized by coaches and your peers as one of the elite athletes in your area, Orange County, again, one of the largest counties in all the state of Florida. Yeah. And to have that clarity that says, but I know what my calling is, and I want to spend my time pursuing that. And I know that I'm going to make mistakes along the way, right? Just like I did in sports, just like I've been doing in life, but I'm willing to go through that. I just think it's like super impressive, man. It's just super dope. Because I know for me at that age, I didn't have that clarity, obviously, about what I wanted to do or my calling. Again, I was like, well, I've been beating my body up since I was 11. Might as well. What's a couple, 4 more years, right? Yeah. But man, for you to be able to just kind of walk away from that and commit yourself to something is super, super dope. So,
yeah, I appreciate it because I'd say a lot of decisions I made as an adult, I look back at sometimes like when I'm really like journaling or like anytime our family has been like on the precipice of like a big decision, like there's this thing in me that goes back and I got notebooks written all about it, but where I go back and I'm like, does this affirm the 18-year-old version of Shav's courage? Like, does this give that kid who is willing enough to risk it all, like, is like, don't let that kid outbrave you, bro. Like that kid was able to make that decision, look at all those coaches and say no, look at moms and pops for like, if you're going to say no, at least you could have done was have a better GPA. Like, listen, bro, like what you going to do now? All right. I don't know if you notice where your GPA is at, son, but so it's like, I had to constantly go back where I'm just thinking like, I cannot allow the bravest moment of my life to be 15 years ago, to be, that kid, as amazing and as courageous as it was. I got to move and continue to ride that momentum. And man, honor that kid who gave up his dream, honor the kid that gave up, that opportunity. So thanks for noticing, because I try to, man, especially those early couple years, because I started helping coach and stuff. I go to camps. I'm like, man, I'll bust some of y'all right now. Like hold on.
Give me the pass, man.
Especially because at that point you still. I was 21 years old. I was like, I still feel all right, man. Like maybe I could do ministry and walk on or something. Like I don't know. So there was always those things in my head. But man, I can't. Hopefully, one day, and I can really find the words to accurately communicate it. But I just knew that I knew that I knew. It was just one of those, maybe because it was fresh to me. I say it this way, I'm sorry if I'm rambling, but I always tell people like, having not grown up, and this is coming from a pastor, having not grown up in church was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because when I was experiencing those shifts and changes of heart that I was going through already at 17, 18 years old, it was honest for me. It was real. And it was so authentic and tangible that it was like, nah, like this isn't my upbringing trying to influence my thoughts or my decisions. This is what I believe I'm hearing and what I know in my heart. I got to be brave enough to move on this. Like, so it really felt like, oftentimes for me, now my kids are PKs, right? So now they're growing up in church without even having a chance. For me, it always felt like, man, the best thing that happened to me was that I didn't have to filter through all these other ideas of what my life had been molded to look like. And I was able to just go, I'm pretty sure my heart's telling me I got to do this, and then just follow it. So it was a big deal, man.
Nah, absolutely, man. Absolutely, man. Actually, so I've shared this in past, kind of past podcasts, but whenever I hear something that's profound that really like sticks with me, I gotta call it out like I do in music. Like that was a whole bar, and you just gave a bar about being courageous and not letting that kid from 15 years ago out courage you, especially as a leader. Courage is one of the attributes that I think gets kind of the least amount of spotlight. Because I think when you think about courage, in order for courage to exist, in a lot of respects, there has to also be a tangible fear,
Absolutely.
right? There, you have to be able to overcome that, right? And so, vulnerability and fear is not necessarily a attribute or a characteristic that we tend to call out as leaders that exist for us as leaders, but it absolutely exists. And more importantly, it's about how do you display courage then as a leader to overcome it, man. And you touched on it. So I'm definitely taking that one with me. I'm holding on to that one for sure.
That was good. Yeah, we were just talking yesterday. This group of men that I get with every 2 weeks, and specifically talking about the courage piece and how your values. You should have values, and what are those values that you stick to? And that's kind of the line, that you draw for yourself in your life. And those values really then start to drive your conviction and what convicts you to make the right choices. And then sometimes you're going to have these choices where, like, I know this is what my heart, the spirit is calling me to do, but I might be scared, right? There's still that fear there, but those convictions and those values behind that give me the courage that I need to make those choices and to continue to move forward. And hopefully do what I'm called to do, man. There was two things that I noticed too, listening to the two of you guys talk as well, that it's interesting that even though it was in different realms or different spaces, both of you still find yourself as leaders kind of at, in your early 20s, and how your upbringing led you to that point. And then, obviously how that has helped to nurture and make you the men that you are today, in your early 30s. But and then the other thing I would say, Shavier, is that even though it may seem right that when you made that decision, you were giving up something that was so wonderful and so great. And I played football too. I wasn't lucky enough. I wasn't good enough to have that opportunity to have coaches coming after me and that type of stuff. But even as great as that opportunity or option may have been, God has something so much better for you. He has something so much better for you. And I'm sure as you look, back on the last 10 years or so of your life, you've realized that all that glory, whatever comes from that, it just doesn't match the glory of doing God's business, and glorifying Him through that process.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, that's exactly, as sometimes it's like early on, it's so fresh. You're like, man, did I do the right thing? And then that gift of perspective and maturity, you start to realize like, oh no, like this is, my dream is less than his plan, right? It's like this, his plan ends up being that much better. And I'm like, good looking out, big guy, because this is pretty sweet. Like, I love this life that I get to live now. So, yeah.
Absolutely, man. So kind of talking about the life that you're living now, man. And I know you shared with us and the listeners that, you're a proud father of 2 boys. Obviously you're responsible for, leading your family, right. Along with your wife and, raising up these boys on top of, leading your tribe, literally tribe. And so I'm just curious, man, from a leader perspective, it always seems like we're in constant struggle to some extent to strike the right balance and to find the right balance. And so I don't know from your perspective, if you have any advice or just thoughts on like, how do you balance it all, between your personal and your professional obligations, your commitments, because you want to be, you want to do right by everybody that you've been entrusted to steward. So
I think, that's a great question, and that's that daily pursuit, right? I think one of the things early on that I kind of gravitated towards is we talk about balance. And we try to achieve this balance, right? And it always feels fleeting. It always feels like it's moving away from us. But one of the things about balance is that for me, I kind of just add a little bit in front of it. I'm just like, I'm not necessarily pursuing balance, but I'm trying to create a lifestyle of checks and balances. Because we know anything on this one side of the scale or another, even when you reach that perfect balance, the slightest change on either side of the scale throws you off balance again. So rather than just trying to obsess about finding this, I found balance today, guys. And here, I figured it out. If I work out at this time, if I give X amount of time to these people in this time, because man, the next day, you might need a little extra time with the fam or somebody, another part of your life might pull on you more. Now your balance is all out of whack. And now you're just trying to regain the same thing you had. So for me, it's more of a checks and balancing thing daily. like, what do I have more room for today? Or in my life, a lot of it is like, where can I follow grace? Like, is there grace? Like, I got to put in this amount of time to work today. The grace might not be there to be on that one thing for that long. So I kind of just flow and move with it. As far as, that would be my idea on balance. As far as how to even have a good check system on that balance is, man, where are your priorities? Like for me, I've always said, I get the honor and the privilege of being pastor. That's never been my pursuit. I want to be a good husband, father, son, and friend. Like if I'm those things, it just so happens that I also make a pretty decent pastor, but I need to prioritize being a good husband, a good father, a good son, and a good friend. And if I do those things, then I start to see from those places, from those values or those core values that Jimmy's talking about, like now I can live my life of conviction to say, am I honoring these things? So I just try to, give myself some grace to realize that on some days I could be a workhorse and I could just put in work and just get after it. And on other days, it just feels so hard. And I'm all about pushing through, but I'm also all about listening to what's going on in my internal world. And if I don't have the capacity or the grace for it, I just move on. And I just say, okay, I might not have it right now. I have to come back to this, and I'll just kind of circle back to it. Just because I think people can really obsess about that balance, right? Like it's just like, and there doesn't seem, I love spontaneity. I love leaving some room for the surprises, for we didn't know that was going to happen, or I'm so glad I made myself available for this. So my wife and I will we schedule in do nothing days. We're like, we ain't gonna do nothing today. Like, what do you mean? Like, we ain't doing nothing. And then you start looking at your house, like, you could do this and you could, I'm not doing nothing. It's my do nothing day. Like, I'm just not doing nothing today. And I'll get to it, because if not, I feel like ultimately, while my life is playing out, either professionally or however, and I'm getting all these things off of my to-do list, if my internal world ain't right, I just don't want to do it. I need in here to be good, so that, I heard a speaker, you guys probably heard this a million times before, but he always said to make sure your vertical is good and everything horizontally will play itself out. And so I just try to get vertical. And when I find myself like just spiraling, I'm like, let me get vertical. Or for some people, and myself included, it's really important to get inward and figure out like what's going on in here before I can even get vertical, because then I'm all out of whack, right? So I spend a lot of time talking to myself, as y'all might hear, but I spend a lot of time talking to what's going on in my head and heart, and ultimately how that looks coming out, and just trying to, man, be intentional, be purposeful, to be in the moment, say, what does this day require of me? Like, what does this moment need of me? And then give that everything I got.
I like that quite a bit, just because, one of the things I constantly find myself talking with young leaders about in any industry, right? You can be business, you can be, sports, whatever. It's not just the pursuit, but also this mindset around the grind, right? Like, I got to put in the work. Like, even when I'm not my sharpest, even when I don't have the capacity to do so, but I got to put these hours in. I got to get it right. I got to get it off the checklist, the to-do list. And so, there's activity, right? But what is the quality of that activity, right? Or how are you confident that the things that you're doing, right, align with, your vertical? And so to hear from you, just kind of your thought process around, well, first and foremost, what I took is I'm not defined by the position that I hold, right, in life. I don't define myself by being a pastor. I don't define myself by being, a director. I don't define myself by being a learning development professional. Like, that's just something I happen to be good at. But what I am defined by is the husband I am, the father I am, the man that I am, the friend that I am. And I let those things move me. So just to kind of hear that and hear that reaffirmed, man, it's really awesome to hear. And honestly, it's a good mirror, something to keep myself honest to, because I know at times my balance can get out of whack, for sure. And I do think about trying to pursue balance. So to hear it articulate as checks and balances is a nice little gut check for me. and then to also just kind of keep myself tethered to the fact that, well, you know, sometimes there's not the grace, as you put it, the grace to do that work, and I need to be okay with that. So
yeah,
man, this is already like super insightful for me. I don't know about you, Jimmie.
No, absolutely. And you mentioned my pastor I remember the first time he said that, and just how important it is to know that that vertical relationship has to be on point, you know, and keeping lockstep with Christ and how he's leading me. And if I'm not focused on that, these other relationships are just not going to be all that they can be, and really all that I think he would want and desire them to be, especially as a husband, as a father, and just as a leader in general. And he knows, man, you know, when you talk about, as I'm listening to you, I can definitely see similarities in our personalities. And like Devon was saying, just that grind, and I got to put in this work, and I got to put in this work. The Lord knows there's a lot of reasons why he blessed me with my wife, and that's one of them. Because she constantly is just good at reminding me, like, you're going way too fast. You're going to crash. Like, you need to slow down. I know that you're focused and the things you're trying to get done. But again, if you don't get some rest, I know how it's going to end up. You know what I mean? So I'm definitely grateful that he placed that type of woman in my life for sure.
Yeah, good. That's good. I was thinking when you said when Tony kicked it to you, and he's like, "What about you, Jimmie?" And I was like, "Yeah, imagine Jimmie was like, nah, it was trash."
Nah, man. I don't agree with none of that.
I didn't really get anything from that.
Matter of fact,
why didn't we
checks and balances? Like,
you just need balance. Just find the balance.
I like balance.
I like balance, so I'm gonna go after balance. Y'all do what you want.
Oh man.
So I'm interested, you know, after talking about your family and, you know, the things that you hold truest to yourself, those values, and how you focus more on not trying to necessarily keep things in balance, but those checks and balances. As we move on, like, what was that moment that you knew or that you felt that leadership was your calling? Because there's a difference, you know, in that moment that you shared with us when you were called to Christ and to give your life to Christ. But once you got to that particular point and you started to grow into this new individual, what was that calling for you? And when did you realize that, yeah, this is what he has for me?
Yeah. So that was definitely like a huge moment that changed. You're right. Like I think I've always identified leadership qualities in myself. I think you know, I've always liked people. I've always been liked by people. So it's just kind of like people like, you're not shy about it. Man, just like to talk. Like just like to talk. Or my wife to this day is like, you've never met a stranger. And I'm just like, I watch and play a lot of sports, but I write, I read a lot, I play video games, I watch cartoons, I watch musicals, I was in theater as well. So I always try to stay around because it bothers me when I can't get in a conversation with somebody. Like, you don't have to like what I like. I'll talk about what you like. And I might not know a whole lot, but I'll know a little bit, at least enough to start the convo. And I knew that I was a personal, a people person, I was personable. But man, when sports kind of brought out a different kind of leadership. I was an underclassman playing on varsity, so there was moments where it's just like, oh, like I'm captain, like okay, cool, like thank you. And maybe that's because I was the loudest, so I talked the most, but it was just kind of happened, but it changed because I had a coach. Well, again, I'm not a Christian at this time, and I had a coach tell me one day, our varsity coach was just like, hey, listen, I think you're supposed to be a spiritual leader of our program, and I'm like, bro, I don't believe what you believe. Like, I don't know what that means yet. And so I remember my senior year, I came back and I told him, hey, coach, man, I gave my life to Christ over. So it's crazy. And he's just like, all right, it's go time. Like, I knew this would happen. Like, let's go. And so I would say there was around that time frame, I really felt like it changed gears where I started to feel maybe a responsibility. I say stewardship, but responsibility works just as good. I just started to feel responsibility about the influence I had. A lot of times for me, leadership is influence to me. I don't need a position. I don't need a title. I don't need to be looked at as powerful to have influence. I'm going to have influence in any sphere that I'm in where we would take up space. So I just started to realize, like, what do I do with this influence? And so I gave myself to learning, in my 20s, maybe right out of high school, just started to read everything I could read. Took my wanting to talk to everybody about anything personality and just started listening to anybody who would talk to me about anything, and leaning into people who have done it, people who were further along than I was. Yeah, I think those moments were huge because I think it shifted. Like, it just was like, oh, like I'm called to do this. And sometimes it's just getting that picture of realizing that regardless of how many people are following, that you kind of take a peek back and you're like, oh, people are following, like I have a responsibility now to steward this influence and this opportunity. So I think it does do a lot of, it changed everything for me, man. I think my relationship with God really changed everything for me. And that kind of catapulted me into a place where I was just like, if leadership, if I get to influence or steward this influence and that makes me a leader, awesome. But how do I serve? Like, how do I, because early on, I was like, before I had anything to say, it was just like, no, who's cleaning the toilets in the church? I'm like, nobody. Why? Like, I'll do it. Or like, who's stacking chairs? I'm like, I'll do it. Like, who can open up the building? I'll do it. I was just like, let me lead by service and do that first. And that's kind of stuck with me even to this day as the lead pastor of the church. Like, they're like, why are you grabbing them chairs, bro? I'm like, ain't nobody gonna roll more carpets than me. And like, you go hug babies and go greet visitors. And I'm like, man, I love just getting in it and being around. Some of the best conversations for me have been around, some of the dudes are on setup and breakdown teams, man. Like, you just rolling carpets and they're early, out late, and just getting into those. So I think my relationship with the Lord was definitely the moment, but then I think there was a bunch of moments that, peppered my whole life over the last 10 years where it was just like, it kind of doubles down. Like, hey, bro, be conscious that, your voice matters and that whether you're realizing it or not, your actions as well are leading people. So might as well do it on purpose. So,
Yeah, I think about, what you were saying, one about your coach as well, but when you were talking about the influence piece, and for our listeners, really we're trying to help folks through this podcast in a number of ways. And one, if you're the type of individual who is just getting started in your leadership role or still just trying to grow and develop as a leader, it's so important to realize what you said about, it's not about the position, like it's not about a title, it's just about your character. And with that character, how you're able to influence people and influence people's lives in a positive way and serve and even influencing them by how you serve and how you care and how you listen. I think that was really, really important too. Sometimes we think as a leader, I have to be the one out in front and always talking and always sharing and leading. A lot of times it is about listening. And for me too, it's definitely about serving. And in doing so, like you said, just leading by example. So that was really. You mentioned your coach and how maybe even when you didn't necessarily see it, he saw something from that spiritual perspective and kind of had this feeling like there was going to be something more for you. Who are the people that really has helped you to grow as a leader, and what did they teach you along the way?
Yeah, he would definitely be one of them. He's my head coach, Coach John Flav, big old 6'6" FSU left tackle. Maybe he was right tackle. But he's a big old guy, man. And I just remember his constant investment, and he was constantly investing in me early on, giving me a voice. Again, as an underclassman, still letting me, just talk and lead. And so he was definitely somebody early on who recognized something in me even before I recognized it in myself. My pastor, Pastor Frank, he was kind of, like I said, I've never been to church before, never hadn't ever been in anything else. I think the first Bible study, true story, first Bible study I ever went to, I was high and like, I was like, what am I doing here? And the girl who was leading the Bible study, I thought she was going to kick me out. She actually invited me to come back. And that kind of started the ball on, me coming to know the Lord. And, so her and Pastor, because as he was sharing his testimony, I'm like, he's just as jacked up as I am. Like, like some of the stuff he's doing is what I was doing yesterday. like I need to talk to him. And and man, over a decade to this day, just has poured into me. Wow. Kind of taken me alongside and really been a mentor. And then there was things that, and I've told my dad this a lot, like, I say he's the best message ever preached without using any words, right? He just taught me what it was, like, and I tell him that too. I said, man, and all the learning I've done and all the messages I've heard, read, and all the books I've tried to plug into this thick skull, I was just like, man, my pops is example of what it was or what it is to be a husband and to be a father, to be a good friend. I said, man, that is preached more than any sermon. So I've gotten the luck, the benefit, and the blessing of watching my dad show me what it is to be a man, and be okay with fathering 3 completely different boys and still instilling in us these priorities, these goals, these values. So those men were huge. And then I would say, man, like Jimmie mentioned, man, when I met my wife, man, that she is invested and sown and brought the best parts of me, out. And so I would say that my wife has really inspired me, has encouraged me. And one of the things early on, I remember telling her, it wasn't all just game, I meant it. I remember telling her, I said, listen, I don't want to ever have to, I don't want you to ever have to shrink so that I can feel secure. Like, I need you to be as big and take up as much space in a room and lead powerfully and lead boldly, and I'll follow. Like, where God's anointed you and has you to lead us, like I'm okay. Like, I'm secure. Like, let's go. I'm gonna follow. And she's really called out the best parts of me, and been patient when the worst parts of me is what came out. So, so I would say my wife too. I mean, those 3 men and wifey amongst it, you get inspired by a lot throughout life. But I would say those were the most intentional seed planters, man. And they stuck around to watch what was going to bloom and blossom out of it, tend to it and everything. So,
yeah. Yeah, man, it's actually, as I listen to you kind of share the
people. I don't do this. I'm like, I hope this doesn't ruin everything again. I got the bloop, bloop, bloop sound. I'm going to do one at a time.
You're fine.
I'll do one at a time.
But, as I just kind of listen to you share about the folks that have influenced you, and even how you knew you had a calling, or you came to the realization that you had these skills as a leader, right? And you had influence, and there was a responsibility to treat that influence with care. The one thing that just keeps coming to my mind as I'm listening to you talk, man, I think it, deserves to be highlighted, is the humility that you just possess through that entire process. That humility to have the wherewithal to know if I'm going to actualize, these skills as a leader and live out the best values, I have to be humble enough to learn and to seek out in other individuals who are further along in their walk than me, and glean everything that I can. And then the humility to say, well, look, what does leadership look like to me? Well, it looks like servantship. That is leadership. They're synonymous. And I'm gonna be the person rolling up the carpets and cleaning the toilets and, stacking the chairs. And again, the humility, to, kind of fight against the stigma that is associated with the male ego, and, thinking that other people need to be small in order for you to feel secure and for you to feel big, to know that you can still exist in all of your glory and your wife can exist in all of her glory. And those things, it's not an either or, they complement each other. Again, it's just multiple examples of humility that you're speaking to that just really resonate with me, man. And if I could pass on anything or kind of draw attention to anything that is just standing out in what you're sharing and your story for, new leaders, old leaders, young leaders, people who are coming to the realization that they have this skill set and they don't know where the hell to start, right? It's, listen to the story about humility, because I think that's going to guide you in the right place that you need to go, man.
I appreciate that, man. I think hearing you say that reminds me, like, one of the things I had always kind of purpose to kind of root myself in was want to stay simple, like the reality that this God loved me, that God loves me. I was like, let me stay there and not ever graduate from that, right? Like, let me keep it, simple in that sense. But one of the things too that I think is important to say about leadership, and like we talk about humility, is that, there is a part of me that has to always check myself, and whatever room I'm in, you check yourself and go, okay, what can I learn? Like what can I get out of this? What can I learn from this? And I think leadership, especially in the idea or in that realm of humility, is saying, I don't have to downplay what I'm good at. And I don't have to minimize who I am and what God has accomplished in order for me to receive from others. I don't have to compete, because me being me is enough, and then that's okay. And I do that. But one of the things I've always said is like, uh, be okay with being in a room that is being led by someone else, as long as you can still lead yourself, and that's one of those conscious things for me. Like, all right, Shav, of course, learn from the room, pull from the room, let someone else take the lead. But at the same time, have an internal fortitude to be able to also say, okay, God, how do I actualize that? How does that become a catalyst for me? Because I don't want to run the risk of just trying to live Jimmy's life. I want to live mine. I want to live. I want to live the life He's called me to live. So having, the I call it just putting roots in. Being almost stubborn in the sense of not to not be teachable, but to be okay with saying, learn. But at the same time, like, God, who have you called me to be, and how does that work out for me? And I think you can only do that through humility. Because if you don't humble yourself, you just show up into the room like, they don't got nothing for me, or I've heard this before. And that's one of the things that I love. That's why I still love being around teens and youth ministry, because I'm like, teach me something, y'all. Like, go ahead. Like, I want to hear what you guys got to say. And yeah, man, humility is that thing that everybody loves seeing in others, but it's the hardest thing to do for yourself. It's that thing like, man, I love when that person, he's just so humble. She's so humble. What about you, bro? Like, what are you doing to practice humility? Because it's one thing to be aware of it, because when we see it, we love it. But how do you practice humility? And honestly, dude, sometimes it is learned behavior. It's like, how do I check my ego and say, let me learn this from the beginning again. Let me see it from a different angle. Let me see. And that's why I love people, man. Because all these walks of life, I could be like, so how did you get to that point? Like, tell me, like, how you got there. And I love seeing those things come together, dude. So
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. So, so we talked about, you getting your kind of your first foot in the door from a leadership perspective, and growing as a leader, and people that have poured into you. And obviously you hit that point where you're ready to go at it on your own. And as you referred to, be the lead pastor. But I would imagine even before you kind of planted your own church and really, took on the mantle of being responsible for leading, in your life, you faced adversity. You faced adversity as a leader. And so I'm curious if you can pull on a specific time where you face adversity and just kind of talk us through or share with us how you were able to lead through that, and what did you learn, in those moments?
Yeah. Again, coach used to say, it's not about if adversity will come, but when. And we'd be playing games, and when you're winning, it's just like, oh, we're winning, we're rolling over these dudes. You're starting to feel good. You cheering on other guys, like, let them get in. Like, you think you're doing stuff, and man, they're like, listen, it's not about if adversity coming, it's when, and you're gonna face it. What are you gonna do with it? And man, I think I could think of early on, some of the adversity I felt we sensed was, for me, was being a young leader was just that and even to this day, it's like you're pastoring your peers, you're leading your peers. And there's some forms of adversity from that, just because, that I think it was more internal for me. It was just hard for me to be like, show up in a room and talk to certain coaches or other men. And, they're a couple years my senior, 10, 20 years my senior, further along in their life. And I'm like, man, they're looking at me like I'm a novelty. Like, oh, like, ain't this cute? The kid that got clean and now he's a pastor. And I'm just like, man, nah, man, I really love him. You gotta prove your word, brother. I got something to say to y'all too. So I think there was those moments of having to push against the adversity that comes in when you start doubting yourself. The adversity for me early on was doubt, like the adversity, or thinking of it as an adversary, thinking about something that was coming against me. It was doubt. It was the lack of, like, I went from feeling incredibly confident and sure of myself to all of a sudden going, I'm not qualified to do this. I don't have nothing to say. Or some of the folks in the church are just like, man, stick to the high school kids and the college kids. Like, don't come over here with any of that. It's just like this idea of like, what? Oh, maybe they're right. And so I think what really helped me overcome some of those things was reminding myself of my inherent value, and reminding myself of who God says that I am, reminding myself of things that, we read in scripture that talk about not allowing yourself to be despised because of your youth, allowing but to become an example in character and in deed, and kind of staying in it. So those moments were huge early on, to just learn how to fight against doubt. Then there was always the qualifying thing. Like, again, I heard me say, said no to college ball, then in the same amount of time said no to seminary, because like, nah, I'm going to be insane. So there was always this part of me that I'd show up to certain gatherings, and I'm, at that time, not so much anymore, every now and then, but at that time especially, I'm one of the youngest leaders in the room. And then they're all telling, so where did you go to school, or where did you go to Bible school? And I'm just like, well, the same place Peter did. I did it, like, you try to say stuff real slick so they disqualify you. You're like, well, I have a doctorate in biblical, in Bible. And it's like, nah, man, like, hey, bro, I know I love him and he changed my life. And I would remember early on feeling so like doubtful of the call, and that doubt led to shying away from moments, and it led me to taking what I would say was to operating in a whole lot of false humility, because then it was just like, no, you go, when I knew the God had called me into that space, but somehow I lost my confidence. Overcoming it was just like refinding it where I left it, which was at his feet, was realizing that there's nothing nobody in this room can do to change the fact that he's crazy about me. He sent his son to die for me. Like, that I can have a relationship that called me out of where I was. I got clean. I got right. Like, here I am. And so that doubt early on was one of the biggest things. And man, I would, hopefully not to say too much or talk too much, but right now I feel like we find ourselves leading in the midst of a crazy amount of adversity as a pastor and as a leader, with the social and racial tensions, with leading in a global pandemic. Like, there's this thing in us that right now, like, our community, we haven't gathered since March 16th. Wow. And that's just a decision we decided was best for our community, to not meet during this time. And so we called it a little early, and then we haven't been back, and everyone's like, yo, so what you think when we come in? I'm like, I'm just going to keep on listening, to the Lord here. And if I'm not going to be pressured. So right now, the adversity feels like maybe more than ever in a time in history, there's a lot of people looking at the church. Like, so what do y'all got to say about X, Y, and Z? And so as a young leader, dude, I just kind of taken up space, and I'm just like, you know what? Nah, man. I told my wife, I said, if we're going to build a church, if we're going to plant a church, not that our old church didn't do this, but it just felt like what we knew that we had to do was to speak up in these kind of moments, that we needed to champion oppressed voices, that we needed to make a home out in the margins. And that's kind of been our thing. It's just like, we find ourselves a little left of center, most days. And it's just like, I call them the fringy kids. We got all the people who are out on the fringes. Like, I'm kind of in, I'm kind of out. I'm not sure about the whole God thing. And I'm just like, cool. You want to come to church? Like, you want to stay? You want to stay for coffee and come over for dinner? So I think for me, leading right now, this is maybe some of the most adversity we've ever sensed. I mean, people jump up in my DMs, Jimmie, you got muscles, you got to beat them up, bro. They be coming at me. They're like, listen, just tell it, just preach the gospel. You keep bringing up, marginalized voices. You keep talking about social and racial justice. And I'm like, man, my heart burns for it because I'm convinced that when I read the scripture, the man I fell in love with, this man Jesus, that he was consumed by it. So right now we're leading in the midst of adversity, and it feels like what that looks like is, not being afraid of the moment, not being afraid to speak up, not being afraid to challenge some of the status quo. And I'm not necessarily, I think time will tell if we did it well, but I'm proud of what we're doing. I'm proud of being able to speak up, and, the people who have found our community to be able to feel safe has been really important. So, yeah.
No, absolutely, man. It actually was interesting to kind of hear is even in your own personal adversity, and then you draw the parallel to kind of the adverse times that we're leading through, which again, everybody, if you're a leader, you're having to deal with this, whether you're just making the decision to face it head on or not, whether you're making the decision to actually speak to your folks and reach out and find out how they're doing and their well-being and provide stewardship and shepherd them through all of this. There's no getting around it. You have to lead through it, right? The pandemic, the social justice issues. But in both of the examples that you provided, you personally, right, in those spaces and early on in your walk in them today, doubt still seems to be the adversary, right? Either doubting your own ability and your worth and being in those spaces, which every leader, I don't care who the hell you are, what you've accomplished or how successful you are, you've had to have that conversation and face that monster, that doubt monster. Especially, for me, I can relate, getting into leadership super young age, early 20s, 19, 20, and I can't even legally drink, but I'm over here trying to tell you how to, perform and live your life in order to make sure you're successful for your family and all the side eyes that come with that. And hey, bro, what you talking about? Save that for the after school specials. You know what I mean? I'm a grown man, and having to overcome that. But then also the doubt that exists now about, like you said, should I be speaking out on these things? And, I have a platform. And so if I have this platform, and whether we all realize it or not, we all have platforms. Our platforms may vary in size. Right. Some of us have the platform that is, built to talk to millions, thousands. Some of us, our platform, is built to talk to the 20 or 30 people that, we highly influence. But regardless, we all have a platform. And as leaders, we're having to reconcile with how do I best leverage this platform to speak to the moment. And that doubt of, am I doing it right? Am I saying the right things? Am I leading by the right examples? Do these align with my convictions? And at the end of the day, if me, holding true to my convictions and speaking out and leveraging my platform in this capacity, ultimately means that by championing the marginalized, I end up marginalizing myself from others. Am I willing to deal with that? And again, so I just admire the fact that, not to hear that you don't wrestle with those things, because I think if you came on here, you said, hey, I don't deal with these issues, there would be just a bunch of inauthenticity, and I don't think anybody could really connect or resonate. But to hear that you are dealing with those things, and yet you still work through them, and you still pray about it, and you talk to people, and again, you go back to that vertical, aligning internally and then vertically, is super powerful to hear, man. Super, super powerful to hear.
That's good.
I think it's important too. I mean, it's kind of that double-edged sword, right? We talk about the confidence as men that we have, and just as people, but us three men speaking to each other right now, and that ego, and how that that ego in a wrong perspective, right? It can get us out of whack. It can get us trying to be more than what we are or what God has called us to be, and how even with the confidence, though, there's still that doubt, that creeps in. And, Devon and I have had conversations, and he's held me down many years, but even in the last couple of months, and things that I've been going through, and just, man, like, am I good enough? Can I really do this? And there's times where you wake up and you feel like Superman. There's nothing I can't do. And then, you hear a no for this, or you hear a no for that, or just something happens again that just challenges you. And it is a huge bit of adversity, that we've all gone through, man, in the last few months, specifically, like you mentioned, with the pandemic and the social injustice going on. I would tell you too, brother, man, you just you got, again, let the Holy Spirit guide you, right? And I'm sure you're doing that as you prepare for your sermons and the word that God has given you to give to the people. And there's that healthy friction that's needed, right? And maybe people don't want to hear that, but they need to hear it. And maybe it's convicting them or getting them to feel a particular way. But you just got to, I definitely agree that you got to continue to preach the word as well. But there's plenty of examples, even in the word, about social injustice and things that Jesus called out to other people, or that Paul, as he was writing to different churches, was calling them out for. So as you're going through that process, man, you just got to continue to allow the Holy Spirit lead you in that sense. And those other people, whoever they are, they're going to have to deal with that in their heart and their spirit. And if you need some muscle, let me know, bro. I got you back.
Yeah. Like, so do I have the muscles or not?
Yes. Okay. Cool, man. All right. So I think, you've definitely, for me, this has just been an awesome conversation and enlightening, and you've given myself, and I won't speak for the listeners, but I'm also going to speak for the listeners to say, even our listeners, a lot to just really kind of chew on, man, and go back to and process and reflect on. And so kind of with this last question, if we could put a little bit of a bow on it and, kind of pass on some parting words, just what words of advice would you share with leaders or aspiring leaders today, just about leadership? If they had to walk away from this entire conversation, one thing to say, this is what I need to know about leadership, what would that be, man?
One thing, man, I'm a preacher, so I'm like, all right, first, 2, 3,
right? What are my 3 points?
Let me do these 3 points real quick. I'm like, you said tired bull. I'm like, let's go back to courage. So with courage, no, but honestly, I would say the first thing, and even as I goof around and just kind of laugh a lot, but I would say the most important thing, if I had to give one, would just be to lead authentically. I think that, especially now, we have so much information, we have so much access to different voices, we have so much access to different knowledge and different streams of thoughts on all these different subjects. I think the most important thing to do is to recognize that at the end of the day, there's something 100% uniquely authentic about who you are and what you bring into a space. And the best gift you can bring to that space, whatever it is to be as 100% authentically you as possible. Because at the end of the day, when things start to get pressed, when things start to squeeze out, if what you have is a little bit of this person, a little bit of that voice, and a little bit of this and that, when it really squeezes and gets tight, you won't be left with anything. So I think there's a way of, betting on yourself some and investing in yourself to realize, like, okay, like, of course you want to be knowledgeable and you want to learn, but what is it about me that I bring to a room that if I don't bring it to the room lacks? And I think that that's huge for leaders, because we have so many great examples that if we're not careful, we spend most of our lives living like someone else. And again, I think that version of your life that only you can live, that has to be what you go for. That has to be your pursuit. And then leadership is no different. I tell people all the time, like in our, when we're talking to our leaders at the church, some of our closest friends, my board, the people speaking to my life, they might think like, man, Shav, like you're always so gracious. You're always so kind. And, you need to be more forthcoming. Just shoot straight. And I'm just like, it's not who I am. And, like, that's why my wife's here, like, like that's why she's here. She's gonna shoot straight. I'm gonna hug you and love you and just try to get you there slowly and just like, look, I don't know either. Let's figure it out together. Yeah. But I think that, over the years, what I've started to do is really recognize it. And I think it happens, and I'll say, not that I think this is 100%, but I do feel like, in my life, it's shown, and in some other lives around me, I've seen it as well. I think, in your youth, in your teens, you already have that thing, but you don't know you have it. That's why my coach had to see it before I did. In my 20s, you kind of shape and mold it. In your 20s, you kind of figure that thing out. You start to see what works, what doesn't. And it's weird, because I noticed myself, the closer I got to 30, the more I felt like I just kind of feel a little bit more sure of myself. Like I just feel better. Like, this is what I got, like this is who I am. But something else happened at the same time. And it was that I felt like I started to see it as a value. I started to see it as something worth bringing to the room. It's like, no, the reason why you're at the table is because you have that, and, I didn't feel, so I just given myself to sharpening it, to honing in on it. And if that's not through the lens of, if that's not using humility, of course, but if that's not using intention, at the end of the day, the authenticity will lose itself. And people know that. And we're built that way. When you just know when somebody's fake, you can feel it when it's like, off the script, and you might have done it. You work on a call center, they give you a script, but then once you start flowing a little bit, you're like, I like doing it this way, and you try to help sharpen that and get good and invest in that thing that makes you. Like, the saddest thing, when we talk to our young people, because we got a very young church, when I talk to our community, it's like, listen, like, I don't need you to be like me. Your pursuit is of Jesus. That's who we're going after. That's the goal, the target. But I need you to learn what your voice is, because when life gets hard and adversity does show up, you can't say, well, Pastor Shab says, like, you got to know in your own heart that you can stand on that and that you can speak to it. So we try to make sure we're championing authenticity in our community. Like, hey, come in messy, come in a work in progress, all of the things, but you got to be authentic, because if not, we're just going to present, a version of ourselves that we're okay, or we think that people want to see. And man, fam, I'm just not in it. I'm just not in it for that. I want to be seen for me. Sorry to ramble. One of the voices that has really helped me as well would be the research. Like, you get mentored from afar, right? I've never met these people, but they've been sewing into my life. And Brene Brown always talks about, like, connection and connectivity. And one of the things that she mentions is, like, man, connection happens when you're fully seen, known, and heard. And if I spend my life just giving you the version of Shav that I think you guys want, I'll never feel fully seen, known, and heard. And I'll never feel connected. And then I'm isolated, and I'm programmed. We're wired for connection, as she says it. Like, it's just who we are. We're wired for connection. And I just don't want to connect I don't want to connect my inauthentic self to the rest of the world. I want my truest, all of Shav to be accepted and fully seen and known in the world, man. So I would say, if you're a leader, man, find what makes you special. Find out what you bring to the table, and man, fight just fight like hell to make sure that that's the thing that you continue to gift the world with. So. I know no short answers. My bad, y'all.
No, I'm digesting that. That was good, bro. That was good.
Really good, man. It was really good.
It's yeah, man. It's that we all have different gifts and talents, man, and sometimes because of fearfulness or a lack of courage. Or a lack of confidence. Like, there's just so many things that God has blessed us with to be able to share with others. And again, just really digesting that piece, man, about the authenticity and how important it is to just really be yourself, and hopefully grow into who God has put you here to be. But in doing so, allowing people to see that in all of your greatness and goodness, and even in all of your faults, because that's real, that's authentic, and that's, again, what creates that connection. You know what I mean? And we all have that choice as leaders, but just as people in general, right? To live this life and kind of have, those relationships that are surface level, or really allow ourselves to, maybe it's not with everybody, but definitely have people in your life that you're just super authentic with, and you are who you are, and all of your faults, all of the bad things about you, all of the great things about you. But in that connection, there's just that love when you see, definitely God accepts you for all of those things, but those people who accept you for those things as well, and help you to continue to grow, past those things. Man, that's just powerful. Like I said, I just had to take a minute to digest that, because that was really good.
Yeah, same here, man. Like, again, I don't honestly, I don't think there could be a better answer for an aspiring leader, a new leader, or even a seasoned leader. Because sometimes as a seasoned leader, to your point, Shav, you could have been getting by being the version of me that I think the job calls for. Yeah. And maybe you're running into situations where, why can't I advance my career? Why can't I take that next step? Right. Well, maybe because that next step requires what you actually possess and you haven't been demonstrating that. Yeah. And so you've been blocking your opportunity. You've been blocking your blessing, and you have to feel confident, to your point, that what you possess brings value. Like when you kind of shared that and you said, like, we all have that thing in your teens, which I agree with, I believe too, because like I said, even before we knew that these leadership positions existed, I'm going back to us in middle school, like you could just peep, oh, okay, that's somebody that, I trust. I'm gonna listen to what they got to say, right? Yeah. Or when we run into adversity, when we're behind in the chains or the scoreboard, like I want to hear what Shav has to say in this moment. I want to, I want to hear what Devon has to say in this moment, what Jimmie has to say in this moment. So in your teens, you have that. In your 20s, you're kind of shaping that and molding it and figuring out what works for you. In your 30s, like as you got closer to 30, it was more of understanding that what that thing that you have represents value. And so, I'm kind of laughing here because I know, when we're talking about setting all of this up and, you're just talking about getting prepped and, I'm going back through some of your posts and I know you make fun of yourself for talking with rapper hands.
I'm sitting on them.
That Ricky Bobby moment.
Yeah. But what I will say is it makes sense to me why you have rapper hands when you speak, because, man, like you've been dropping bars seriously this entire conversation. Just some really, really good nuggets, man. Seriously, like this has been just a super valuable discussion, man, to connect with a leader such as yourself, man, and kind of hear your words. So thank you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, it's definitely been a blessing to have this conversation as we've just, talked and chopped it up with Shavier, who is the leader and pastor of Tribe Church and Congregation. Definitely, man, talking about humility, about being intentional, and the courage that we really need to have in the face of adversity, and the courage to step out and be authentically us and really build connections with people. So thank you, brother. I appreciate the conversations and what we were able to learn from you today. But tell the people who are listening, how can we learn more about your congregation? Where can they find some of that information out there in the world of the internet?
Yeah, man. So the easiest way to connect with us is I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Mostly Instagram and Twitter these days. But at Shavier Martinez, that's Shavier Martinez. And then our community is Tribe Orlando, and that's also on Instagram and Twitter under that same way. We live stream our. This isn't a knock to everybody who records, pre-records their stuff. I get it. I know why we're doing it that way. But man, for me, I value authenticity so much. I'm like, nah, one take, let's go. We're going live. So we broadcast live. That's why it can be a little messy. Forgive me. But on Sunday mornings, we go 11 a.m. at that Tribe Instagram. And then, I'm excited, man. Y'all making me brave. I think we've been sitting on a podcast of our own, and I've been sitting on some content. So I'm like, man, I'm gonna do this with my boys, bro. I'm like, I'm gonna get right and do that. So stay tuned for those things coming. But right now, it would be through social media would be the best way to stay connected. If you guys have any questions and just want to chop it up, that'd be the way to do it. So.
Cool. We appreciate it, man. So for all of our listeners, you can definitely continue to follow us on all major streaming platforms. We've been on the move over the last few weeks. You could also find us on Instagram at Legacy Leadership, and definitely check us out on our YouTube channel. So if you're listening, fantastic. Continue to do that. Download the podcast and listen at your own pleasure and your own convenience. But also check us out on YouTube channel so you can get some of the visual and see some of the fun that we're having, and even some of the behind the scenes moments. We're going to start sharing some of that as well. So definitely appreciate that. If I haven't mentioned, also find us on Facebook, but in all those different avenues, definitely like, subscribe. Again, continue to download the the podcast itself. And we just thank y'all. We thank you for continuing to ride with us, continuing to listen, to continue to show support and show us some love, because it definitely means a lot as we continue to take this journey and just continue to learn, man. Continue to learn and grow as leaders and as men. It's a beautiful thing. So again, this was truly a blessing. I'm appreciative about the time that we were able to invest this evening. As far as the next episode, Devon, that we have coming up, little tease about episode number 5. I know that we were asking our listeners, for some questions. So I believe that's next on the hit list, is doing a Q&A. So if you haven't hit us up yet, especially on Instagram, hit us up in a DM or just shoot us a message. Let us know what questions you have about leadership, what you'd like to hear us talk about. That's really going to be next on the list for us. And then after that, we're going to definitely start, diving into some specific topics and giving our listeners out there some strategies and some tactics as we continue to, again, share our experiences, our stories, but how we view some of these things that we've learned to continue to grow as a leader and, again, help others develop as a leader as well.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I think actually it's also worth mentioning, if you do reach out to us, your identity is safe with us. I know that some of you guys want to be vulnerable and you're dealing with very specific situations.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're going to make sure that we protect, those that are seeking out for advice, and really just kind of sharing the crux of your question, really, because I'm confident there's other leaders out there that are dealing with similar things, and so they want to hear. So if that's a concern for you, please don't worry about it. Reach out to us. Again, we're excited to be able to answer those, and then I look forward to the episodes following that as well, where we get an opportunity to dive into some specific topics, and then also have a couple more guests on for some more MBA sessions. But I gotta tell y'all, man, like,
my bar has been
set. That bar.
All that confidence I lost in my 20s is coming back. It's coming back.
Absolutely, man. Cool. Thanks, guys, man. This has been great.
Take care, everybody.
Yep.
Rage on that beat, going.
You have just listened to the Legacy and Leadership Podcast, hosted by Jimmy Gonzalez and Devon Watts. Thank you, and we hope that you live, lead, and leave a legacy worth remembering. Until next time.